My name's Eliot. I work on the creative team at Sea Island. I've been there for 15 years. I studied photography at SCAD, and I'm really just nuts about the outdoors. Dr. Holbrook really kindly showed me the college's entomology collection as we got here today, which reminded me that I'm not an entomologist or a biologist. I don't have a professional background in this stuff. It's a passion and it's just a hobby and something that I'm really excited about sharing with y'all. So, can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, cool. So I'm going to read a couple of paragraphs from a journal of mine about some nature things to kind of set this up. And then I'll jump into my talk. So I found myself on an ever-deepening and inherently widening journey of exploration, observation, and classification of the natural world at home. I've traveled far and wide and yet remain gripped by this 100-mile Georgia coast. I'm drawn over and over again to what author John Hanson Mitchell in his essay Ceremonial Time calls the great undiscovered country of the nearby. After nearly 20 years in my Glynn County home, I continue to be fascinated by ongoing personal discoveries of natural phenomena. This is due in part to the fact that I live in a really remarkably unique and special part of the world. But I also have to acknowledge that it's tied directly to the idea that according to Cumberland Island's Carol Ruckeshell, we've forgotten the names of things. Not rare and exotic things, we've forgotten the names of the things right under our noses. And the silver lining in this kind of disappointing reality is found in what a simple joy it is to experience something new. To truly know a place from an ecological perspective is a lifelong task. It's not for the faint of heart. Many of y'all have been doing it a lot longer than I have. Like many efforts, it's accomplished one small step at a time, each observation layering on the last. It starts with extended, intentional time outdoors, and an awakening of the senses to both the subtle and the dramatic unfolding all around you. Sober, present, and intoxicated by my surroundings, says author Susan Cerulean. Listen, look again, look closer, take notes, ask questions, make sketches and photographs, study books, and seek out historical records. Embrace what author Christopher Camuto refers to as the old taxonomy. He writes, walk in the woods where you can, slowly and irregularly like an animal, and focus your eyes to see. Enjoy the broadness of life so organized, the sanity of the tangible, and mark its details well. To know a name is to assign meaning and value, its significance. What a riveting game it can become to seek out such simple delights. Over time, the unknown begins to become known, and the forgotten remembered. So, I have been doing this nature thing for a long time. I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, in the middle of a cornfield. I moved to Georgia in 2006 to start studying photography at SCAD, and was just fascinated by one, being near the ocean, which was awesome. There's such more like a diverse landscape here than there is. My wife is looking at me for how long I'm going to keep this slide on the screen. Such a diverse landscape here compared to where I grew up, right? So I was surrounded by cornfields and some interesting kind of creeks and woods, but so floored when I got to Georgia of what there is to experience here. So I'm going to give a quick, how I got into birding. In 2018, I got this awesome opportunity to go on a commercial photo shoot to Hawaii. This was an awesome opportunity that I was really excited about. We were going to go to Maui and Kauai for 10 days and photograph all of the awesome things that there are to do in Hawaii for this tourism company. Around the time I was getting to know this guy, Tim Kais, who went to church with me. Many of y'all know Tim. And he said to me, while you're on this Hawaii trip, it might be a cool thing to do to look at some birds and maybe keep a list while you're there. I think he had a little hint of I might be a little competitive, and I enjoyed being outdoors. So I thought, okay, this could be an interesting way to add a cool layer to what's already going to be an awesome trip. So I bought a pair of binoculars, I bought a field guide about Hawaii, I studied a few birds, I had an incredible time, I made a list, I had 12 species while I was in Hawaii, and I was really proud of myself. I came back, I talked to Tim, I was like, you won't believe it, I had this great time, I saw all these exotic things, it was incredible. I saw 12 different species of birds. And Tim said, well, Eliot, that's great. If you enjoyed that so much, why don't you consider exploring it here in Georgia? Because there's this guy named Gene Kieferl who's seen 320 odd something species at the time in Glynn County. And I said, I know nature, I know wildlife, I know a little bit about birds. There's no way that's possible. Not a chance. lo and behold, like a week later, this rose-breasted grosbeak showed up on my feeder at home, and I went, holy crap, something I've never seen before. I thought I knew wildlife. I thought I had spent a lot of time outdoors and was familiar with bird life. Lo and behold, I was not. And so this was kind of my spark moment of where I went, okay, this could be something really interesting. And so that afternoon, I went, okay, if there, is this one bird I've never seen before, there have to be others. And I cracked open my book and I went, oh my gosh, I am never going to be able to tell these things apart because they all look pretty much the same. Y'all have all experienced this, I think, or I hope at one point in your birding, right? You go, I really hope I find something new today, but I'm not sure I'm going to know it when I see it. And so I kind of went, okay, I'm going to go walk around my neighborhood today. I learned about eBird kind of early on. I'm one of these millennial birders that eBird has been around the whole time that I've been birding. So I learned about eBird pretty early on. I kept an eBird checklist the first time I went out birding around my neighborhood. And I found 14 species in my neighborhood, and I went, oh my gosh, there are more birds in my neighborhood than there are in all of Hawaii. Which was like fascinating to me, because again, I thought I knew things, and I found out that I didn't. And that's kind of what this whole thing is about for me, is learning something new. And so I found that like at every step of this thing, there's something new that I don't know that's out there for me to go discover. And that could be like, walking around the neighborhood with my kids and we find an insect that I, again, was unfamiliar with. Or we're out in the swamp in Clay Hole and I come across a warbler that, at the time I wasn't familiar with. And that's really exciting for me, is to find something new, to discover something new. So, I'm going to come back to this slide for just a second to tell you about this book that I read called Circling Home by this guy, John Lane. It's a super interesting book. It's not about birding at all. It's about a man who moved to a new place, and he said, I want to get to know everything that there is to know about this place, the ecology, the economics, the, who's buried in the cemetery next door, the people, the neighbor, the plants that grow in the woods behind his house. He goes kind of on this whole quest of, I'm going to define this geographic area. He takes it like a bread plate and draws a 1 mile circle on a topographic map around his home. He says, I'm going to use this boundary and just learn every single thing I can about this boundary. So about everything within this boundary. And so that's I've kind of adopted that idea and taken it and applied it. For me at the moment, it's about wildlife, about animals. And so I may broaden that at some point as my interests change, but right now, for a while it was birding. I've kind of broadened it a little bit to be more about pretty much anything that moves. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. So this project kind of inspired me to put this geographic boundary around what I'm doing, and I've kind of adopted this idea of getting to know home. Right? I've lived here for 20 years now. This is definitely my home. And so I want to know everything there is to know about it because I'm proud of it. I love it. It's a really cool place. All right, so one day I was out birding and by myself, and this guy rounds the corner with binoculars on. And again, I went, holy crap, other people do this. I did not know. Like, I knew Tim. I knew birding was Tim's work. Birds were Tim's work. But it didn't fully occur to me that I might get to know other birders and there'd be this like social element and other fun, like kind of competitive and relational and interesting nature to it. And so I got to know these people, and they're all awesome people. Some are in this room. And I learned about, I'd mentioned Gina had seen 300 species in the county at the time, and I'm like, that is something I want to do. And it became this kind of competitive thing that I spent about 3.5 years working towards. And I'll tell you more about that, getting ahead of myself. The point of this is learning that there are other people out there that were into this too, and that was really exciting. Now I know most of you guys love that. Kind of phase 3 of birding for me was I went, oh my gosh, I can kind of contribute like meaningful data to eBird of like things that maybe haven't been documented in the county in 10 or 20 years, or things that maybe haven't been documented in the county at all, or maybe haven't been documented in the state at all. And I got really into like making Excel spreadsheets and looking at bar charts and historical data and all of this awesome wealth of knowledge that eBird provides for us about birds. If you haven't dug into that, I would encourage you to, even if you're not as passionate about birds as I am. It's really cool to see when there are large groups of different species passing through, or look at some historical records and see that wow, there may be a handful of birds that haven't been seen in the area in 20 years but used to be common. What's that about? Is it about habitat or climate, or all that stuff is really interesting to me. So the bird on the left is ash-throated flycatcher. This is a little bit of a story about my photography, which I'll tell you a little bit more about, and that's that I work in photography. I kind of got into birding as almost the antithesis to photography because it was something that was like experiential. There was this creature in front of me, and I'm like, oh, that's really awesome, and it flew away. And I said, Bob, guess what? I saw an X, Y, and Z. And he either said, oh, that's great, or he said, no, you probably didn't. Which is the case with this. It was November of 2018. And I posted a report to eBird and said, I saw a great crested flycatcher in late November. And I get this phone call from this guy, John Mark Simmons, who says, no, you didn't. And I went, well, I think I did. He said, well, it probably was this other very similar species that's in the same family that occasionally winters on the coast, in Georgia and Florida, in the southeast, this ash-throated flycatcher. And I went, well, doggone it, I wish I had been carrying my camera. But at the time, photography, like I mentioned, birding for me was very much about experience. It kind of went, I just want to see something, experience it, move on, and I move on with my life. I don't have to capture every moment, tuck it away somewhere. But this kind of gave me this, like, oh, good grief, okay, well, I have this competitive element. If I'm going to claim that I saw something, I probably need to be able to have some documentation to say so. Now I'm an eBird reviewer, and I understand that a lot better because day in and day out, I'm looking at reports of things, going, okay, show me that you saw this, write a nice description, show me a picture, give me an audio recording, something that's meaningful. And the the kind of closing to the story is, thankfully, about 3 months later, in February, we found maybe the same bird about 10 miles from where I had seen it the first time, and was able to get a whole bunch of other folks on it and see it, and it was a first county record for me, which was really exciting to me at the time to contribute something new to the data. And dickcissel is an example of a bird that hadn't been seen at the time in eBird. There was not a record of dickcissel in the county for the last 20 years. And I spent some time kind of studying timing and looking at where might I find it. Okay, it's this grassland bird. Where are some places I could look? What's kind of the window of time? And I found 2 of them back-to-back days in similar habitats on different parts of the county. So I went, okay, there could be, and so sure, maybe that's luck. Maybe I was doing a whole lot of birding and I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. But I also think there's something to like studying and targeting and kind of going, okay, I can learn a lot of things about this creature and its habits and where it's going to be, and then I can go out in the world and find it, and that's really fun. I get a lot of enjoyment out of that. So I got excited about kind of these 2 ideas of finding new things and then also like seeking things out that hadn't been seen to kind of fill in gaps in the data. Let's see, I've got this clicker upside down, which is why we're going backwards. So this slide is just to kind of give you a full crazy picture of my like peak competitive birding when I was going absolutely nuts about this and spending way too much time looking at birds and maybe not enough time doing my job or other things that I should be doing. And so in 2020, I found a lot of birds in 2020. I wasn't working for almost 4 months because of COVID, which was fantastic. My kids were 3 and 5. I spent a ton of time with them outside, which was so wonderful. But I spent a lot of time birding. And during that year, about in October, I think I had seen something like 240 species. And again, I get this phone call from this guy, Eliot VanOtteren, who is an eBird reviewer in the northern part of the state. And he said, hey man, just so you're aware, you're really close to breaking this state record of, nobody has seen more than 250 species in a county in a year documented in eBird in Georgia. I went, okay, that sounds really nuanced and weird, but it's a goal I can work towards and be excited about. I went, okay, cool. If, there's this goal out there, I'm gonna work towards it. And I spent October, November, and December of that year trying to just stack as many species in the list inside the boundaries of the county for that year. And got to 276 species, which was over the previous record by 26 species. I'm probably the only person who cares about that, but it was a ton of fun. And so I continue to do that for 2021 was kind of a down year, but 2022 and 23, I did the same thing and continued to push that species list higher. I truly think if I didn't have to maybe work and other obligations, I think it's possible to document 300 species in the county in a year, which I think would be a really, really cool goal, maybe when I'm retired. That 2020 year of birding, I added 40 species to my life list. I was just on this total high, like let's find something new every day. It was so much fun. Today I've seen 327 species in the county, and I'm trying to get a couple more on Jeannie, who has 332, I think. every time, we just keep bumping each other up, which is fun.
As soon as I die, you can't.
No. All right, so I can't give a talk without telling this story, so y'all humor me for just a second. In October of 2022, I was birding on Sea Island, and I found this bird on the south end in this tree all by itself. I went, okay, I know this is in this group. It's an invasives flycatcher. It kind of resembles this one I've been targeting. I was hoping to find a yellow-bellied flycatcher. I still haven't found a yellow-bellied flycatcher. It will happen. But I thought, this is something, just humbly, I don't know what it is, frankly. I got back to the house and I sent some pictures to people and said, hey, some folks that I know that are experts on invasives. So what do y'all think this is? And right away I heard from this birder in Arizona. He said, that's a Hammond's flycatcher, and here's why. I went, okay, let me real quick do some research and learn about Hammond's flycatcher because I don't know much about it. And the more I dug into it, the more I kind of became convinced, okay, I think he might be right. And I shared it with a few other local birders and thankfully was able to get some other people on it, and lots of other people saw it, which was fun. And so I wrote our eBird reviewer for the state that night and kind of said, hey, I think we have this thing. And he wrote me this kind of funny, sarcastic reply back that was like, maybe, that sure would be nice, but we won't really, these species are so similar that we won't really be able to tell without maybe like some DNA. Great. But also, you put a challenge in front of me, I'm excited about it. And I started thinking about what can we do about that. And I was talking with some friends of mine in Bird last night, and they said, well, this guy, Charlie Muse, is running this bird banding station on the south end of Jekyll. He happens to know this guy, Dr. Yabsley at UGA, who does this genetic research stuff. And if we were able to get a genetic sample, we think Charlie could get it to Dr. Yabsley like tonight. Okay, let's go. So I took myself and Dan Vickers and a couple of other guys out to see if we could somehow get some kind of genetic sampling from this bird. Lo and behold, it pooped on a leaf. It was Dan's birthday. Dan walked into the bushes and walked back out with the biggest smile on his face. I have it. Right? And I drove and met Charlie in the middle of the night that night. Well, I'm skipping part of the story. I had dinner with my in-laws that night, sample in hand, and I had read that it needed to be refrigerated if it was going to be a meaningful. So I wonder how many of y'all have asked your mother-in-law, would it be okay if I kept this vial of bird shit in your refrigerator? To which, she has known me long enough. She kind of just rolled her eyes and went, yeah, okay, sure, really. And lo and behold, it came back positive. This is Hammond's flycatcher. It's a first record for Georgia, which was my first time having a first record species for Georgia. I was really excited about. Again, finding new things. All right. And so I found a lot of birds. And then one day, I'm out birding. My friend Dan, who I told you about, was his birthday when we got the Hammond's flycatcher sample. Dan was always saying to me, one day, you're going to lose interest in birds and become interested in like maybe other creatures like butterflies or dragonflies, which happen to be kind of the most conspicuous next thing that are everywhere. You walk outside during summer, you're going to see a butterfly or a dragonfly. And so I, for years, said that's not possible. There's no way I would look at anything other than a bird. One day I was out birding and I went, oh my gosh, a butterfly. And kind of became really the same way I had become interested in birds. Went, okay, here's this whole world of things that I don't know about. And so eBird is great, but eBird is for birds. There's not other opportunities to document other species other than like putting in notes, which I had kind of gotten in the habit of doing, of like, oh, I saw a coyote while I was out doing this birding thing, but it isn't really a meaningful way to keep track of the data because I can't go back and like search and find it later. I learned about this thing called iNaturalist. And iNaturalist doesn't discriminate about species, which is great. You can keep track of everything from like the smallest arthropod to mammals. I'm going to show you iNaturalist a little bit in a minute, so we'll come back to that. But all this to say, all of a sudden my eyes became open to this whole new world of not just insects, but really kind of anything that moved. I'm interested in plants, but not nearly as interested as I am in animals right now. And a cool thing about the small things is they're harder to identify with binoculars. There's also a whole lot more of them, like a whole lot more of them. There are 360 some odd species of birds documented in Glynn County. There are more like 4,000 or 5,000 species of arthropods documented in Glynn County. I think there's 2,000 in iNaturalist that have reached what they call research grade. So about 2,000 species in iNaturalist. And the thing about this is a lot of times they can't be identified by a picture, but many of them can. But oftentimes, like, in order to learn about them and study them, I had to start shooting pictures again, which was fun because it got me interested in photography again in a way that was really kind of exciting. It was good for my personal life, who I was making work I was proud of and excited about. It was good for my work life because I was reinvigorated about doing creative stuff at work. And so I learned really quickly as I started posting these creatures to iNaturalist that different groups of species have, like, you need different pictures to be able to identify them. So like for this one fly, you gotta have this ventral view of the thorax or whatever to be able to confirm that it is a species. And so I got in the habit of like shooting a lot of pictures of insects and learning really quickly about that as I went. But all that to say, it kind of reinvigorated my excitement about photography. And so this has become kind of a project for me again. It's more of an art project than just a kind of experiential nature project. So I'm going to take a few minutes to just show you some pictures. I'll talk a little bit about photography because I think some of y'all are interested in that. I usually carry 2 cameras. I'm carrying a telephoto lens for things like that dragonfly that was on my first screen that, you know, is far away and moving fast and hopefully in good light. And then I carry a macro lens with a flash for things like this fly that I can get really close to. Hopefully some species are obviously more like spooky than others and they're going to take off if I get close to them. But for things I can get closer to, I like to have this macro lens because I can get a lot, you know, closer, detailed, and better lit pictures with a macro lens and a flash. This fly picture is a great example of a lot of times you want to make sure, an important thing with iNaturalist identifications in general is making sure that as much of the creature as possible is in focus. I'm trying to make sure that my lens is on the same plane as that focus, as that creature, so that all of the aspects of it are in focus all the way from like the tip of its wings up to the antennas. And I'm just trying to shoot as many pictures of it as possible in hopes that somebody on iNaturalist or a viewer, I'll tell you a little bit more about that, is going to come by and say, yes, I think this is a species. This is an eastern hognose snake I happened upon at Altama WMA. A pleasing picture-winged antlion that a friend of mine who kind of isn't as into lion but appreciates my passion for this called me in the middle of the night and was essentially like, hey, there's this really cool thing on my tree, you should come over and take a picture of it. And of course I did because I'm nuts. Eastern bark centipede, which is, we've got these really cool blue tips on its legs. Lacewing roadside skipper, which is an example of kind of like I talked about, kind of that idea of targets and unicorns, of seeking something out, is a butterfly that I knew was out there in Glynn County somewhere. Did a lot of reading about it, learned the kind of plants that it's into and the habitat that it likes, and went and sought it out and found it. It was really cool to kind of check that box and go, hey, I did that. Eastern Chuckle's widow. I happened on this thing in the daylight in Fort Frederico, which was really cool. We rarely get to see these birds in the daylight. You hear them calling at night. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with them. Just really beautiful, intricate feather details. I do a lot of photographing insects, particularly at night, because they are attracted to a light. Mike Chapman, who I think is in here, introduced me to the idea of using a sheet, like a white bed sheet, and a light to attract insects to the sheet, and then you have a better opportunity to kind of photograph them. And so this fungus weevil is an example of an insect that flew into a light and landed on the sheet, gave me an opportunity to photograph it. I do a lot of this. I was in Altama Wildlife Management Area Sunday night this week by myself for 2 hours in the dark, photographing insects. Yeah, this is a really cool creature that Everly right here found at Altama Regional Park. It is a true bug called, I'm going to say, a brevipennis. It's like similar to, it appears similar like a mantis or a stick bug, but it is in fact one of the true bugs. Another one of these beautiful butterflies. This is fawn crescent or fawn crescent. I do like very little of interacting with other people who know about insects, so I probably pronounce some of this stuff wrong. A lot of it is like reading on iNaturalist. Thank you, Andy. Some more pictures of insects. Most of these are shot with the macro lens. You can see they're really evenly lit, which is coming from the flash. This is a robber fly over here. I've gotten pretty good at identifying insects like at the family level, and when I'm putting observations in iNaturalist, I'm often putting them in at that level. The reasoning for that is that I guess I would say that in eBird, there are regional reviewers, right? So like Bob and I are the Glynn County most of the coastal county reviewers. iNaturalist is a little bit different in that the reviewing is not based on geography, it's based on like species groups. And so there'll be someone who happens to be passionate about tiger beetles, and that person takes it upon themselves to review most of the tiger beetle records. You often don't get a confirmation as quickly as you do in eBird, where somebody, you expect to see your rare thing get confirmed in 6 or 7 days. I have stuff that's been sitting in iNaturalist unconfirmed for a year or more. It's just part of doing it. And part of the way to like help seek out IDs is one, to take interesting pictures and make the subject big in the frame and make it accessible for somebody who wants to ID it. But also you can like, in iNaturalist, I'll pop in and show you in a minute. Sweet. You can see who are the lead identifiers for a species group. So like, let's say, I have this like mayfly. Again, I think I broke this thing.
Eliot,
Yeah.
did you identify the flower in the article? That's your next thing.
Yeah, we'll talk about that a little bit. if I get there, I'm probably trying to take on too much. But let's see, where was I headed? So like, let's say this tiger beetle. Completely lost my train of thought.
Sorry.
If you're looking for an ID in iNaturalist, I often put them in at family level so that someone else will be, it's like this confirmation bias thing, right? They'll want to come by and help increase it, move it down in scientific classification from family to genus and to species, hopefully. And the way that iNaturalist works differently from eBird is that it requires a certain amount of agreement between folks who are coming by and identifying. So if Sarah comes by and says this is X, Paula comes by and says it's Y, we need 2 people who are in agreement that say it is the species that they're saying it is before it will reach what they call research grade status. I like to not put my observations in at species level most of the time, because I don't, especially if it's something I'm not confident about, even if the AI is suggesting that it might be this thing, because I would like for 2 other people to come by and confirm it before it hits that research grade status. Some more beautiful creatures. I know everybody loves this yellow fly of the Dismal Swamp. You might be familiar with it. If you've been out to the Omaha River, it will come for you.
This has like a novel.
Yeah, who names these things, right? This is Atlantic Bluette. A beautiful little damselfly with this bright blue sterling color. Again, this is like, I'm trying to have the creature on the same plane as the lens so that I get all of the elements of that thing in focus. Because as I mentioned, different groups require different marks, just like birds. Like, with one species, the primary feathers are more important, or with another species, the bill is more important. It just so happens that, like, here we go. That these couple of last sections of the abdomen are really important for ID. And I've learned some of those kind of nuanced things as I've been doing more and more of this. I've done a lot of, I think I've put close to 10,000 observations in iNatural so far. I've learned a lot about the different pictures that are needed to identify certain groups. And that's just from doing it over time. Stripe or 6-line race runner rarely stays still long enough for a picture. I was kind of proud of this. Some Jekyll South Dunes. I think Both of my kids held this striped mud turtle. We're super excited about it. This is another example of some insects on the light sheet at night. So there's all kinds of different insects that are attracted to light at night. A lot of times we'll be watching a movie late at night, and we had a commercial break, and I'm gonna pop up outside and go out to the front porch light and see what's hanging out on my front porch. And I found first state insect records that way, which is wild to me. So, backing up just a little bit, of course, I've already, I'm sure, communicated to y'all that I'm a little bit competitive. I got this idea in my head of, I knew there were about 2,000 animal species documented in Glynn County. At the time, I'd seen 327 birds, and, was already getting up into, seeing 50 butterflies, and had documented, another 30 or 40 dragonflies. I went, okay, 1,000 species is certainly possible. It would be a really fun goal to work towards. So I started going nuts about photographing any creature that moved, and set this goal to reach 1,000 species. I got there in June of last year. My kids made me a cake, set 1,000 species on it. We celebrate all kinds of stuff at the house. So this giant lichen orb weaver was my 1,000 species in Glynn County. As of this week, I am just shy of 1,500 and would love to push it up to 2,000 species, because I just keep finding that there's more stuff to be found. And that excites me. This is just to kind of give you a picture of kind of geographically all of the places that I go and the different kind of habitats that I visit and look in. Part of the way to find new things is to look in different places. Another way to find new things is to visit the same place over and over again. In birding, I think we call that a patch. I have a kind of favorite patch on the South end of Sea Island that I visit often that has produced like upwards of maybe 4 first county records and then 2 state records in the same tree. So I think that says something about the place, but it also says something about the fact I just visit it often. I'm always checking it out. And it's something I love about the coast is that the habitat is always changing, right? Every time I go to Jekyll South Beach, something about it is different. And that makes living in this place really awesome and fun and exciting. Because it's like, where I grew up, it was like, well, is it corn or wheat in the field this season? And I love being in this super diverse place of the Georgia coast. And the fact that, even all the way up to Omaha, you see the tide rise and fall in the river. And so I might be, experiencing a completely different landscape each time I visit Clay as well, which is pretty cool. And along the way, I learned about whole groups of creatures that I never knew existed. So y'all probably know scientific classification better than me, but kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, maybe I got that right. These are all identified at the order level, which is pretty high up in classification. And when I first found them, I went, holy moly, I didn't know that this entire order of creatures existed. Which was, again, exciting. Are y'all getting the picture? I'm excited about this stuff. So I was out with this guy, Dirk Stevenson, when we found, Dirk is a fantastic naturalist on the Georgia coast, and we found this this bombardier beetle that you can kind of see the right half of right here. And he said, oh, come look a little bit closer. There's this other thing here called a pseudoscorpion. I went, pseudo what? I did not even know that that was a thing. And so this is just to paint a little picture of there's all kinds of stuff out in the world that you've never heard of, and finding something new can be really awesome. This is just a quick kind of pie chart slide. I know this is a lot to take in. The point here is to say that there are close to 2,000 arthropods that have been documented in Glynn County, and iNaturalist, and of course iNaturalist is just one database. There's other data sources out there, but I kind of focus my energy on iNaturalist because it's something I have access to and can dig into easily. And just to give you a picture of the, I photograph anything that moves, and so 64.8% of what I photographed has been insects. There's a lot of insects out there. I photographed research grade in iNaturalist have 600 insect species in my backyard. Really wild. I don't mow my grass anymore because there's no bugs. I don't mow my grass. At least it's an excuse. And so this is just kind of a rundown of some of the bigger groups of insects: Lepidopteras, your butterflies and moths, Calothrus beetles, true bugs, flies, ants, bees, wasps, and sawflies, which I'm going to show you a picture of a sawfly in a minute. Cora, when we were walking, Cora, right here, raise your hand. Raise your hand. When we were walking Hoffel Broadfield Loop last Saturday, I guess it was, said, "Hey Dad, I got this bug, come check it out." And I walked over and checked it out, photographed it. Oh my goodness, this is something I'm not familiar with. This happens a lot. We get it in iNaturalist, have a suspicion it's a sawfly. You know, the iNaturalist AI suggests an identification to put it in the sawfly group. And a couple of sawfly expert folks came by later that day and said, "Hey, this is the first confirmed record of this species in iNaturalist. In the world, not Glynn County, not in the world, which is really cool. There's one other unconfirmed record of it in Wisconsin. And to have them so far spread apart, it's just fascinating to me. So that's a whole new generation of finders. Neuroptera is down here at the bottom. Ant lions are super cool. If you're not familiar with ant lions, then look them up. They make these cool, the larvae make these pitfall traps that ants fall into, and then they sit down on the bottom of these pitfall traps and snatch ants as they come by. You see birds is kind of the 20-ish% of the pie there, and then things like, you know, reptiles, amphibians, and mammals are a really small slice of what's up there. And so, you know, being interested in new things, I kind of lost interest in like mammals really quickly. There's still a lot of reptiles and amphibians that I can find, which I'm excited about. I'm still kind of learning how to find those things. This slide is probably impossible for you to read, but I threw it up here just to say that yes, I'm passionate about this, obviously. Like y'all have heard me talk about my interest in it, but what I think is really cool about iNaturalist is that a lot of other researchers and scientific organizations and schools and students and museums and all kinds of other folks are looking at data in iNaturalist for all kinds of important projects, whether it's a BioBlitz on a state park where they're working through documenting the species groups that are on its property, or whether it's an individual who's writing a field guide about jumping spiders. Many of y'all have probably met Giff Beaton, is working on a book about jumping spiders. And so he's kind of reached out to me and said, "Hey, I don't really have anybody on the coast that's photographing jumping spiders." Go figure, there probably aren't a lot of people who are interested in photographing spiders. So I took it on myself to start making sure that I make a nice photograph every time I see a jumping spider, and those pictures might be utilized in this book, which is really cool. He says down here at the bottom, "Dang dude, this other iNaturalist user is right. Even better find a species I've never seen. If you see it again, please catch one and send it to me. I want to study it." This Mormedia pama is a true bug that this iNaturalist user, that I posted, that this iNaturalist user says, "I don't believe this specimen has been reported outside of Florida in the literature as far as US records are concerned. If you happen to see one again, please catch it and send it to me so we can add it to our collection and update the literature." I got a message from this guy who identifies bark lice, guys. And people are into all kinds of wild nuanced things. When I first became kind of interested in insects, somebody said to me, "Wow, you've really kind of reached the fringes of society." Which, you know, fine, sure. But that person is a insane birder too. We're all in this crazy thing together. And so I say this to say that stuff that I find and put in iNaturalist becomes useful and helpful to other people and can contribute meaningful things to science. This is Cora's sawfly right here. That is the first confirmed photograph of this species, which is really cool. This Pachyris cellophane cuckoo bee I photographed in the garden on Little St. Simon's Island on my first board retreat with the Coastal Audubon group. They gave us a vitamin break. I went out with the camera and photographed some bugs while I was out. This researcher from Michigan wrote me a message later that week and said, "Hey, I just wrote a paper about this bug. I've only seen it as a dead species. Somebody sent me one from Florida, and I'm not aware of any other living photographs of it." So those are really cool because it's the first that known, right? Who knows? But photograph of a living specimen of the species, which I think is really exciting. And I'm glad to be able to contribute some meaningful data to science. I hope some of all of this crazy stuff that I do is meaningful to somebody. This was really fun. Some of y'all might have seen the millipede thing on the cover of the Brunswick News on New Year's Day. Cora, again, we were in the backyard looking for bugs. We flipped over a log and she said, "Hey, what's this really tiny, cool red thing?" It's like as small as like a pinhead. We photographed it and went, "Cool, something we haven't seen before, put it on iNaturalist." And a student from Georgia College reached out to me and said, "Hey, I'm working on this project of the millipedes of Georgia. And this species that you photographed is not known in the Americas." Oh, that's cool, we need to find some more. And so we went out in the backyard and flipped over the same log again and found 10 more of them. Surprise, there's a whole bunch of them right there. And unfortunately, we learned it's an invasive species that is known from China. There's a handful of records of it in China. It's invasive. But it's still important and meaningful to science to be able to have more awareness around how these invasive species are moving around. How new things get here. So, this paper breaks down a little bit of how it might have gotten here on a container ship or in landscaping material or on an airplane or who knows. That's part of the whole interesting journey. So, I think I'm going to stop here and just kind of show you guys some iNaturalist, which I think is some of what, folks who aren't familiar with iNaturalist, I'd love for you to just see it a little bit. If you're interested in following along with my pictures, I post a new species to iNaturalist that I photograph in Glynn County every day. I've been doing it for 311 years, for 311 days. I'm just going to kind of see how long I can keep it going of putting a picture up of a new species every day from the county. So, let me switch over to iNaturalist. How many folks in here use iNaturalist? Awesome. Okay, great. We are at 42 minutes. I'm just going to spend a few minutes on this. All right, then? Yeah, that's cool. Okay. iNaturalist has these. So one, if you've used iNaturalist, chances are you probably use the app on your phone, which has a whole lot less functionality than the web browser version. The iPhone app is pretty straightforward. It's like you take a picture, you upload the picture, it automates the GPS and date time out of your photo, probably from your phone, and uses an AI to suggest what the creature might be, right? And a lot of times it will give some specific species level things, but it will also say like, we think it's within this family or this order. And so you would then submit it, and it comes into this Explore tab on the back end, right? And the Explore tab is everything that has ever been reported in iNaturalist everywhere. So you can see here, there's 233 million observations from all over the world, from 3.5 million observers, and 414,000 people have contributed to identifications. This is a little bit overwhelming, so I'm going to pop in and look at it kind of at the, my passion is Glynn County, so we'll look at it at the county level, and I can really quickly see what folks have reported this week. So the stuff that's up at the top of the feed here is the most recent observations that have been put into iNaturalist. And you're seeing all kinds of things here, from reptiles to flowers and plants to gastropods and fungus and pretty much any biological life. And then you have the ability to filter here by species group. So let's say we want to look at beetles. This keyboard is different than mine. And here we can start to look at all of the beetle observations from Glynn County. Really quickly, you're starting to see some of my observations from Alabama on Sunday night. Of some beetles that came to see my white sheep. When I pop into this filters tab, you can look at you can filter by a whole lot of different criteria. So I can say I only want to see the observations that have reached this research grade status, right? Folks have agreed this is what this is. Or we could say I want to do some identifying, and I only want to look at species that need an ID. You can see I have some species in here that need IDs. If you know something about beetles, please come by and help me. And then you can also, obviously, similar to eBird, filter by date and time and geographic region. You can look at different parts of the scientific classification, filter by users or by a certain project. So for instance, my brother is running this conservation project in Glynn County at Kennedy Pond, and he has a project set up for Kennedy Pond that any iNaturalist observations that are put in go to this project. So I help him kind of moderate that project and regularly going through the Kennedy Pond iNaturalist project to hopefully help him identify species so they can build a species list of what's visiting this property. If you pop under this observations tab, now you're looking at your observations, right? So this is my 8,231 iNaturalist observations. You're seeing I've put in some form of an identification for just under 2,500 species. Many of these are not identified to species level, so like if you pop into needs ID, I have 1,000 species that I would love for somebody to come by and help me ID. Some of these will never be identified because the pictures aren't good enough or I don't have the right picture. But it is meaningful if somebody will pop by and say, hey, on this yellow ghost spider, next time if you encounter one, put it in a petri dish, flip it over and photograph the underside of it. I'm like, sweet, okay, great, I'm looking for another yellow ghost spider. So it gives me another kind of goal. I keep a list of those kind of things in my favorites tab over here, which is just a way to like group and build collections of organisms, right, of observations. Yeah, so when you are uploading a species, let's see, the best way for me to probably show you an identification. If I were to say I want to add a identification to this calligrapher fly, I'm going to pop in here and say suggest an identification. Now the AI is going to go ahead and tell me that the most likely choice based on all of these pictures that are in here of Argent calligrapher, that it's probably this calligrapher fly, and it's going to suggest 2 or 3 others that are similar. And if I want to do some work to learn a little bit about those creatures, I can pop into this compare tab right here, which I think this is one of the most useful and interesting things in iNaturalist for people who aren't familiar with it, is to jump into this compare tool. And then you can filter by place and by taxon and see what calligrapher flies have been seen in Glynn County, right? And then I can have an opportunity to compare these and go, okay, yes, this is in fact the one that I found, which is really helpful. It gives me at least a starting point for ID. It can be a little frustrating when you pop in here, more like a species group that has less data in the database. You might get no suggestions under Glynn County, and that would imply that nothing within that group has been photographed here. And in that case, I'm usually broadening the geographic scope to say, okay, well, what calligrapher flies have been photographed in Florida or in South Carolina, and then I can start to get an idea for what might be nearby. So that's kind of a super high level look at iNaturalist. If anybody wants to know more about iNaturalist, I've been using it for about a year. I'm still learning a lot about it. It's a really cool way to learn a whole lot about a whole lot. There's all kinds of great data in here. It's also, I've not really gotten to know, but had a lot of interactions with folks that know a whole lot more than I do through their comments on things and messages, and I've learned a whole lot just kind of through the collective knowledge that we've used, which is really neat. Thank you. If anybody wants to hear more about kind of my photography, about iNaturalist, I'm happy to talk a little bit more about photography, but I know I've used my time, so thanks for being patient with me.